Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we've got 3 horror films, or maybe 2 horror films and a drama. I'm a little up in the air as to the genre of the third one. As you may know, I'm doing only movies I haven't seen before in January, and it's still pretty tough. There are some movies I want to see that I've seen many times before. I want to rewatch, for instance, John Boorman's Point Blank, but I can't do it until I've done 31 movies this month. So the struggle, as always, is real, and let's get on with it. Now, 2 of these movies are comedies. One is not, but it does have certain dark comedic aspects to it. The first one from 2023, and it's a movie called Slotherhouse. It's a comedy horror film that stars Lisa Ambalanova, Cindy Craven, Olivia Rure, and Bianca Beggles-Rose, which was hard to say.
We're all gonna die slow, horrible deaths at the hands of an adorable little killing machine.
The story's pretty simple. A young woman called Emily Young, played by Lisa Ambalanova, and I'm sorry for mispronouncing that, adopts a pet 3-toed sloth called Alpha, and she wants to use it to help her gain votes to become the head of the Sigma Lambda Theta sorority. Now, this gains her a whole bunch of votes against the mean girl of the piece, and nobody knows that secretly the sloth isn't just a cute, slow-moving ungulate. Is it an ungulate? I think it is. But it's actually like the Captain America of sloths. It can move very fast when it wants to, it's incredibly intelligent, and it doesn't like anyone. This is a mad idea for a horror film. Take the slowest moving and cutest of beasts from South America and turn it into Freddy Krueger. According to Wikipedia, the concept of Slotherhouse originated when the film's co-writer Bradley Fowler tried to come up with the dumbest idea he could think of. One of the other co-writers, Katie Lanigan, described the concept as Mean Girls meets Happy Death Day with a touch of Gremlins. So if you like those 3 movies, you're in with this one. And one of the things they really wanted to do with this, and I think it serves it well, is that they used as much as possible practical special effects. And to be honest with you, it's a very funny movie. The horror doesn't start out as horror, and it starts out as a commentary on social media and social media trends, and people in the sorority are evaluated by how many followers they have, how much Instagram they use, how good their Instagram is, not on any quality of them as a human being. So it's definitely a social media satire, and there are a few of those out at the moment. One of the other films I'm going to talk about is in its own way a social media satire, and there's a really nice scene at the start where the sloth takes down one of the apex predators of the Amazonian rainforest in a very amusing way. I really like this one. I think it's totally silly. I believe it was on Shudder. It's got one of the best taglines I've seen so far this year. Don't rush, die slow. I like this kind of movie where people just take a stupid concept and run with it and treat it with respect and treat it with love and treat it with a lot of blood. And it comes up a winner. Even though it does look like an American film, it was actually filmed in Serbia. And a lot of the cast are either English or European, but the accents are totally on point here. And it worked for me. I just wanted something a little bit lighter and a little bit funnier than Infinity Pool, which I've just watched and just reviewed. And I kind of like starting out the year with nutty films. Comedy is hard to do, and comedy horror is even harder to do than comedy. This one lends it, and there's also a subplot in the movie about taking animals out of their native environments and using them as basically clickbait for your social media profile. I can see that. I mean, pet pig's another one that people do. And I believe Logan Paul had a pet pig that he abandoned in Puerto Rico. There's a kind of knowingness about this film. It definitely knows social media. It knows the ludicrousness and idiocies of influencers, and it plays into that as this slow but very sneaky and then very fast creature takes down a lot of people in some very creative ways. This has got a lot of Freddy Krueger in its DNA as well, and I totally appreciate that. So if you're in the mood for a bit of fun, a bit of horror, Slotherhouse is going to get you there.
Your friends were murdered 35 years ago. It's not 1987 anymore.
Stay safe, honey. I love you.
Then we get on to the second one. I'll do both of the comedies first. The second movie came out on Amazon, and it's another slasher horror film. Now, this one was produced by Jason Blum, the guy who created Blumhouse, under his Blumhouse television banner, even though it isn't on television, it was on a streaming service. And it's a little thing called Totally Killer. It stars Kiernan Shipka, who starred in the recent Sabrina the Teenage Witch reboot on Amazon, as a teenager called Jamie, who, after her mother is murdered by the same Sweet 16 killer who went on a murder spree 35 years earlier, travels back in time to 1987, where she pairs up with her mother to catch the killer during his original spree and return to her timeline before she is trapped in the past forever. So this is a slasher movie. This is kind of like Scream meets Back to the Future. And it works. Again, this is another one that's kind of light but very knowing. And Back to the Future definitely gets name-checked in this, because when she goes back to 1987, she tries to explain to people she wants to help her that she's in a Marty McFly situation. And they kind of get that. They understand that. Even though when she tries to explain this to the cops, one of whom is played by Randall Park, he hasn't seen the movie and he doesn't like time travel movies, so he doesn't understand what she's saying.
Hate time travel movies. They never make any sense.
So in 1987, three teenage girls called Tiffany, Marissa and Heather are killed by the Sweet 16 killer. And each of them gets stabbed 16 times on the night of their 16th birthday, because if you're a serial killer, you got to have a theme. Jamie lives in this town of Vernon, which has one claim to fame, the Sweet 16 killer in 1987. Every Halloween, everybody dresses up like the Sweet 16 killer. There's a guy who does a famous podcast about the Sweet 16 killer. He takes people on guided tours of the different locations of the three kills. And the whole town just goes nuts about this. And then suddenly, Jamie's mother gets killed by the same killer 35 years later. And her friend has a time machine, which is always a useful thing to have in a friend. If you're going to pick a new friend, pick one with a time machine. It's going to be useful in some way, even if it's only to buy Bitcoin in 2019. And Kiernan Shipka is really good in this role. She knows this stuff inside out, having done the Sabrina thing. And going back and attending school in 1987 is an eye-opener for her. For a start, nobody checks her qualifications when she says she's a Canadian exchange student. They just accept it, give her school schedule and send her on her way, because nobody has the internet. Nobody can look these things up. And when one of the murders occurs, she tries to give the cops a blood-soaked handkerchief to get the DNA of the killer. And the cops don't know what DNA is. All that kind of stuff happens. And school is nasty and horrible. There's dodgeball and people get injured in the dodgeball games. And Jamie can't understand why schools would let dodgeball happen as a part of the school curriculum. And the jocks are particularly nasty and sexist and transgressive as far as people's personal space is concerned. It plays into all of those tropes where times have changed and a teenager from 2023 is suddenly dropped into the brutishness of 1980s high school life. The movie is suitably gory. You're not going to have a serial killer film of any kind without a lot of artificial claret being shot around. One of the murders takes place on a waterbed, which is very 1980s. I slept on a waterbed for 3 weeks in the 1980s, and they're pretty good except when the heating element gets unplugged, and then suddenly you're sleeping on an iceberg of jelly until you can wrestle the mattress aside and re-plug in the heating element. I did that, and it was a non-trivial task even then. You get two different time machines, which is kind of cool. One of which is a photo booth adapted as a time machine, and the other one's one of those great big centrifugal force rides on an amusement park where everybody gets stuck to the side of the ride. There's some really tense scenes as the killer and a couple of the young women are pinned to the side of this centrifuge, and the killer manages to stand up kind of horizontally in the centrifuge and comes towards one of the women. That stuff really works. I think it's well thought out, and there are a couple of jump scares that aren't really in-your-face jump scares, but just suddenly the killer's there kind of jump scares, and I like that as well. It's light stuff, and it knows it's light stuff. It's meant to be entertaining. It's not meant to be taken seriously. And because it is for a streaming service, it doesn't necessarily have to get a hell of a lot of word of mouth. So people will watch it eventually. And when you're looking for comedy horror, the algorithm on the streaming service will direct you towards a movie like Totally Killer. So it doesn't have to cater to everybody to find an audience and to ultimately make money back.
Excuse me, what year is it?
1987.
Oh my God.
I know. The 80s are almost over and I haven't even tried Coke yet.
The third one I've got is a Norwegian movie, and I don't know that I've done many Norwegian movies on the channel. In Norwegian it's called Sick Picker, which translates to Sick Girl, but in English it's called Sick of Myself. And it is a black comedy, written and directed by Christopher Borgli, and it stars Christine Kujat-Thorpe as a young woman called Signe, who lives with her boyfriend Thomas in Oslo. Signe works as a barista and a cafe manager, and Thomas is an artist who specialises in sculptures made out of stolen furniture, because it's Norway and Scandinavian people see things somewhat differently. Now Signe gets jealous of Thomas because Thomas is getting all the attention, and Thomas is a narcissistic asshole. He has so many red flags, he looks like a May Day parade in Beijing. And Signe's feeling left out. They go to a dinner after he has a gallery opening of his exhibition, and people think that Signe is his sister because he hasn't introduced her as his partner and he pays very little attention to her. So all of the rich and beautiful artsy people think that she is his sister until she tells them she has a food allergy she doesn't, and they start paying attention to her when she fakes having an allergic reaction to some of the food that's served at the banquet. But Signe has this signature moment where her brain breaks. She's in the cafe working, and a woman bursts through the door covered in blood. She's been attacked by a Doberman outside the cafe, and Signe is the only person who helps her. She staunches the blood with cloths and keeps things going and tells people to call an ambulance and organises things. And meanwhile, everybody around her is just filming it for their own social media, which is very creepy but very on point. Signe takes the bus and walks home covered in blood that's not hers. And it takes Thomas about 5 minutes to notice that not only is she traumatized, but she's covered in blood. And then when he does notice, he twists it and makes it about him. So all of those red flags are there with Thomas. And Signe is broken. The PTSD of having this experience with the woman bursting through the door and looking after her breaks her brain. And she comes across an article about an anti-anxiety medication from Russia called Ledexol, which gets recalled after it is found to induce a skin disease in people and some scarring. And Signe gets a friend of hers to get her large amounts of this drug, Ledexol, on the black market, and she starts taking large doses of it. And ultimately she gets a skin infection, which becomes incredibly severe. And it gets her attention. Suddenly she's got this mysterious disease that people don't know about. The doctors do try to give her an MRI, but she pretends to freak out in the MRI machine so they can't get a definitive diagnosis, and it becomes a mysterious disease. And she gets some media attention from it. She gets attention from her friends. She gets attention from Thomas. And she goes down this dark path of being empowered by the increasing disfigurement that this drug is causing her. And she also gets Thomas to spend more time looking after her because she's in hospital. She gets out of hospital. She's wearing a mask over the scar tissue. And she's down a dark path of being empowered by Munchausen syndrome, basically. There is a sex scene which is very freaky, and it shows how dark the path Signe has gone down, having this kind of mental illness. Things only accelerate. She gets a modelling contract from a modelling agency which has branded itself as featuring people with disabilities, and that doesn't come out quite the way Signe wants it to. And she does the dirty on another one of the models to get herself a prominent position in the photographic portfolio they're putting together for a brand, and things go from worse to worse. Thomas gets arrested, and all of the stolen furniture is stolen, gets taken back, so the flat's empty, and Signa has to kind of confront what's happened to her, and yet successfully manages to avoid doing so. This is a very dark comedy. It's filmed in Oslo in the middle of summer, so it's all bright sunshine. This isn't a dark Scandi noir film. It's all flowers and green trees and sunny days and all of that kind of stuff. And that contrasts with the increasing darkness of Signa's journey. I like this one. I think it's a very different film. And it also, again, looks at the culture of social media influencers and the degree to which people will go to gain prominence in social media. This is not an unrealistic story in any way. There have been any number of toxic influencers who have pretended to have cancer or pretended to have other illnesses or faked illnesses for their children or treated their kids really badly to get the numbers and get the clicks and get the ad revenue. It's a very much a kind of dark comedy for our time. And it's a little bit of a hidden gem. You can find it around. I'm not sure which streaming service it's on, but I found it online. And I like it. I think that it's uncomfortable, it's funny, it's horrible, and it doesn't pull punches, which I totally respect. I think that maybe an American version of this film would have in some ways made Signa a much more sympathetic character. But this movie doesn't do that. It shows that, yes, of course, she's gone through some horrible experiences that have triggered something in her, which has taken her down a path of incredible narcissism and incredible inability to see what she is doing to herself in that narcissism. It is a movie you should check out. It's not the usual kind of stuff I do for the channel, but you can look at it as a horror film. Dark comedies are very often horror films if you look at them and just tilt them a little bit to the light. There are the 3 movies I've got for you. Like I said, I'm doing things I don't normally do, and I'm watching new movies that I haven't seen before. And to do that for me, who has seen way too many movies, I've got to look at some new stuff as well as some old stuff. Later in the month, I want to look at some classic films I haven't seen before. I've got a couple of Fellini films I haven't seen. I've got some classic Japanese films I haven't seen. But this time around, it was horror films and dark horror comedies. So, yeah, so far I've successfully avoided the temptation of watching films I've seen before. And to be honest with you, I'm going to continue to do that, otherwise the whole month falls apart for me. Just to update people as well, Luna goes in for her second operation to just fix that little lesion she's still got on her side where she's pulled open the stitches. And the prognosis is very good. She's got a new collar around her neck, which is not a cone, and she seems to be adapting to that quite well. And again, thank you to everybody who's offered support and assistance looking after the little beast's medical issues. So, yep, the month's going fine, and apart from Luna, we're doing really well. And again, the generosity of people and the kindness of people, just saying all the best with Luna means a lot to us. I'll update people on how she's going and how she gets through the operation tomorrow and how she heals from there. And I hope by middle of the end of the month, she is running around being annoying again, as she always has been. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. Let me know if you're going to watch these movies if you haven't already. You can donate at the YouTube channel page. You can also become a channel member, and you can become a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Not sure what I'm doing for the midweek video. I may dive into that box full of old Fellini movies and things like that and just see how I go watching them and whether I like them. I may even watch something like last year at Marienbad. Who knows? It's a mystery. The future is not for us to see. So until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some really dark horror comedies and laugh your guts out. And I'll catch you next time.